Okay, you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 in Philadelphia, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM and on our website, www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Councilmember Mark Squilla, and we'll have the continuation of our interview with Councilmember David O. Lance, how are you tonight?
I'm all right, getting ready for the storm like everyone else. I did break with tradition. I did not buy milk, bread, or eggs.
Oh, and that will probably mean we're going to have the storm
Right.
because you didn't do that. So we need to be careful. So what are you going to be telling us about tonight?
I'm going to follow up on SEPTA, what SEPTA's doing. There were a couple of meetings in the city, talking with neighbors, very different types of meetings. One in the Northwest where people were treated respectfully, and one for South, North, and West Philadelphia where people weren't even given a presentation. I've got it on video, have a few more facts, and I want to call attention to what City Council is doing to try and help the riders, and uniquely who in City Council is actually doing it. Might be a surprise to some of our viewers that the defense of riders doesn't come from the traditional progressives on City Council, but it comes from some of the older ward leaders who are leading the fight to try and stop the SEPTA cuts.
And with us here is also Denise Clay Murray. Denise, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good, thank you. So what are you going to be telling us about in the second half of the show?
Well, I think I'm going to focus a little bit on the fact that there are like 11 billion people running for city council at large.
Yeah.
Gosh, and I just forgot her last name. Rue
Landau.
She just announced that she was running. I got a press release from a gentleman named Michael Blackie, who's also running for city council at large and hopes to partner with Jeff Brown because of his concern about food deserts. And the question becomes, as it often becomes when it comes to city council, why is no one running for the district seats? If you really want to make a change in the city in terms of how development is done, how economics are done, how any of those things are done, you're not going to do it as a city council at large person. You're going to do it as a district council person. So you have 8 million people running for at large, and we have to ask ourselves, why is it that you would rather run for at large than run for a district seat? It can't be the money. It costs more to run citywide. But that's a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about.
Okay. So we'll look forward to that in the second half of the show. But we're going to start off today with our interview with Councilmember Mark Squilla. All right, Councilmember Mark Squilla, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Larry and Denise. Thanks for having me.
So, you put up a resolution a couple weeks ago I thought was really interesting and really important, forming an opioid task force, and this is going to be funded by money from the National Opioid Settlement. So I had some questions for you about this because I just think it's important and really interesting. So first, can you tell us a little bit about how the task force is going to be formed and what you're kind of looking for here?
The goal initially of the task force was that we're getting a lot of money coming in from the settlement, and it's going to be over 18 years, I think $170 million. And the first year is supposed to be $23 million that we have received or have received partial amounts of that money. So my main concern, and we're working with some of my colleagues, is where are this money being spent? How is it being spent? Who's deciding where that money goes? And so this task force is basically like an oversight committee of the dollars that are being received by the city and making sure that there's input from the community, from council, from the administration, and not just one or two people deciding where this money goes. Now, the first year money that we have already has already been earmarked for certain parts of Kensington, certain programs that they're looking to do. But I think once we saw that, we said, all right, well, there needs to be more input from people who are affected by addiction, residents who live in communities that are impacted by addiction, right? Council members, administration, people who are involved in mental health, people who are involved in addiction services. And I think the input, if it's a general input of people from different walks of life who are all dealing with this, that we will have a better understanding of how that money can be spent, the areas to be spent, and really we want to measure outcomes also. So it's not only about where the money goes, but is the money going in places that benefit both the people who are in addiction and also benefit the surrounding communities that are impacted by people in their communities that are in addiction. And so that was the impetus around creating this oversight committee. And right now the committee is going to be made up of 15 people. We're going to downgrade it to 9, but it was a lot of interest in being a part of this. It's going to be 6 people appointed by council, 6 people appointed by the administration, and then 3 community liaisons. And we thought that we would get together, work with the administration, and then see each year we're going to get money that's going to be earmarked for this cause. And how that money being spent is so important to seeing if we could address the opioid epidemic. And listen, our overdose rates have been continuing to increase over 1,000 a year. We need to get that number down, but we also need to help the surrounding communities that are really negatively impacted by the opioid epidemic and the people who are unhoused because of the opioid epidemic.
So how are you going to choose the members for the task force?
Well, we're asking the administration to select 6, and we're hoping that the administration comes from different backgrounds as far as, do you have somebody from the health department as part of that? You have somebody from homeless services as part of that, and we'll let them pick. And then the council ourselves are going to have 6 folks, and then we're also going to select people involved in the community. Now we are going to then appoint them to this committee of 15. There's some members have reached out already and given us some names. We're going to get a bunch of names. We're going to ask for a call of names. We're going to go over those names and then come up with a short list of, like I said, the administration will have 6. We'll have 6 and 3, which will be 9 from the community. We'll put them together, and we're hoping by the new year, mid-January, we'll have our first meeting. And then the way the resolution is written is that we will be getting 6-month intervals of, where the current money's being spent, how it's being used, and then trying to measure those results. And then where should future monies go that we receive, and then also be able to measure that. My big thing is a lot of times we have resources and dollars that we disperse, but there's really no real way to measure the outcomes, right? Like this money being spent here is really doing a good job. We're seeing that the reduction in use here, we see that more people are getting help and services by doing this program. I think we need to really come up with a matrix. We don't have that right now, but my goal is to come up with a matrix from this oversight committee that we could then see, we could actually measure the results of the money they're receiving from the settlement.
And do you imagine the funds going towards government programs, or is it also maybe private organizations doing work in the community, a mix?
It's a mix. It's going. My goal is a mix. Right now, the initial money that the administration has set forth, there's money for like housing repairs for people who are living in those communities that are impacted by opioids. There's money for some of what we call our nonprofits, our partners out there that are dealing specifically with addiction. Money dealing with community groups. In other words, friends of playgrounds that create programming in these hard-hit communities so that people either in addiction or a part of addiction, but also people in the community can have safe havens and safe places to go. So it's going to be both. Again, a lot of it is going to be decided by the oversight committee, and I don't want to put all my ideas out there and think that I'm going to control that, because what we're trying to get away from is 1 or 2 people from just controlling how that money should be spent, and have more of a committee assigning the spends, and then also be able to measure it.
Okay. Well, it's really interesting, and it's something we're definitely going to keep an eye on. Now, switching a little bit, you are now the chairman of the finance committee, which is one of the clearly the most important committees on city council because it deals with the money, which is how everything operates. You can't have government without the money. So just very, very generally, what are some of your goals for the finance committee going into the spring?
I mean, every year the budget is so important. And this year, I think it's going to be even more important. We have additional resources that we haven't had in the past. We have income that is over budgeted from previous years. So we now see an opportunity, what we can do to move the city in the right direction. And I think this budget is critical in doing that. Also, we have some priorities. I know I have some priorities just myself. We have a couple firehouse stations that are short an engine and a ladder. We have some facilities that need to be rehabbed. We have to take care of our own house. The city is great at building things. We're not great at maintaining things. We have to really look at how we as a city look at all our facilities. And, when we talk about the school district budget, so forth and so on, we know what the facilities committee does and looking at how they address their needs. We have a lot of old buildings in the city of Philadelphia. Rebuild has been great to go through and redo a lot of our rec centers. But if we maintain them, we would never have to redo them, right? We wouldn't have to rebuild them. So my goal in this budget is actually looking at maintenance. Can we really allot for capital dollars so that we can maintain our facilities to keep them up and running? So what they look like now, they'll also be running just as efficiently 10 years from now. And I think that's the key. We have a lot of resources that we go to public safety. Public safety is our number one issue and concern right now in the city of Philadelphia. Every meeting we go to, that's all people talk about. How are we engaging people? We spend a lot of money, $180 million we went to prevention programs, right? Into all these nonprofits, grants, and so forth and so on. How are we, again, measuring those dollars that we're spending for prevention? Are they really doing the job that we expect them to do, right? We have diversionary programs, something like AMCORT, alternative misdemeanor program, where we have resources that allows people to then have diversion if they do get in trouble and have opportunities to hopefully not recidivize and then go back and do the same thing again. And then there's going to be dollars for enforcement. So to me, it's a three-pronged approach on public safety. We have to do all three. We can't just do one or the other. We can't have all enforcement and no prevention or diversion. We can't have just all prevention and no diversion and enforcement. So those dollars, I think, are going to have to be looked at very carefully. But again, I think the goal right now with our finance committee is even look back at our past budget and see that the dollars that were spent, were they spent to the outcomes that we expected? And if we do a little bit of that in the beginning, the mayor should give he's been late the last couple of years, but it's usually in March, right? Because it gives us some time to have some meetings. The last couple of years, it's been a very rushed budgeted season because we're getting them end of April, and then May. And so you don't have time to go over all the line items that are in a budget. The budget's, $5 billion budget. It's a gigantic budget. So hopefully this year it'll be in March, and we're going to push for that. And then we'll have enough time to go over these to make sure we don't only look at our new budgetary needs, but if our old budgetary needs were being met and the outcomes are what we expected.
Well, you said two things that I think are really, really interesting and important. The maintenance piece. I don't know that I've ever heard anybody really address that in that way, which I think that's really important. And then, looking at past budgets to make sure everything was where it needed to be. And so that's really interesting to hear. And I'll be really interested to talk to you more about that. We're not finished the fall session yet. There's still one more meeting. But while we have you here, are there some things that really stuck out about this session to you that you thought were really important?
Yeah, I mean, the council has been very engaged in how we address affordable housing. There was a big press conference yesterday, the start of 1,000 homes and the first-time home buyers program. We talk about affordability in the sense that it's very diverse, like affordability for people who have very low income, but affordability is also for people who work and make $30,000, $40,000 a year. Can they afford still to live in the city of Philadelphia? I think we have to make that a priority, right? We have to make sure that those people that are working and making a salary, even working for the city of Philadelphia, you could be a police officer, a teacher, a sanitation worker. You should be able to buy a home in the city of Philadelphia. So I think the first time home buyers program, which we emphasized and put money in through the housing trust fund, turnkey, is going to have 1,000 homes that are able to be built now by some of them by private developers, where we have a 5149 program through the land bank, where they're able to build 51% of the houses affordable, 49% market rate to subsidize that affordable housing. But also we're able to buy that down through our turn the key program. So if the house is selling for $230,000 or $250,000, you could then buy it down through a second mortgage from the housing trust fund, and therefore your mortgage may be $170,000, right? So somebody making $35,000, $40,000 could get a mortgage for that, and therefore own a home and then build equity. And if what we're doing is, if you look at it, if you build your equity, you could then have wealth, right? Institutional wealth, where you could then pass it down to your family, and you're getting people to be stakeholders in communities. And I think this is key. Affordability is so important. We talked about public safety. Council has really put their money where their mouth is on public safety. Also, we have pushed for public safety ambassadors, which is a new group of folks that are going to be working under the managing director's office to take some of the non-essential police duties off of them, to have help with these individuals. They're not going to be carrying weapons, and they're going to be just there to assist and do things so that the police could then concentrate on what they do, which is fighting crime. That is, to me, a big deal. This is new for us. Places like New York already have people like that. So we'll have to see how this meshes. We also believe that this, could be maybe an avenue to recruit more police officers, people who want to eventually get into police law enforcement. So also working with the Defenders Association and the District Attorney's Office. We talked about AMP Court earlier. That's a big thing, because we believe diversion is a really important part of public safety, and making sure people who get caught up in the criminal justice system have a way to get out of it. And again, the money we spend on diversion. Diversion is, to me, the best way to deal with crime is to prevent it, right? Let's not get people in that, show people that what opportunities are there for them. What can we do? We have a curfew law, and some people are for and against it, but part of the curfew law was creating resource centers, places for people to go. Youth have a place to go where they could spend time. You don't have to, curfew center or the resource center isn't just for people who are out too late past curfew and get brought there instead of being brought home. It's about giving people opportunities and places to go where they could be safe havens. Our gun violence has been, last several years, has been probably second to none in the city of Philadelphia. So that's been a major challenge. And they are focused. They are the things that council has focused on this year, and it have been really important aspects. And you're starting to see it again. When you do things, it takes a little bit of time to start to show the results, right? But we're starting to see the results now. Yesterday's press conference on affordable housing was just the start of 25 homes of 1,000, right? We'll never have enough of it, but we're going in the right direction. And I really believe, when we're looking at some of the reports that we saw from Center City District, where some of our retailers are now opening back up from the pandemic. Pre-pandemic, we had 87% occupancy. We're now back up to 80%. We were down as low as 50%. So you start to see the increase of people coming back. Our pedestrian counts are up close to pre-pandemic times in Center City. That means more people around, more people means it's safer. We also see that the opportunities we have, if we really get a handle on public safety and making sure people feel safe, those numbers will increase. If we don't, we believe those numbers will then turn to go down. So, we're at a point right now where it's really important that we continue to go in a positive step. I see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I really see we're going in the positive direction. So I'm really excited about next year, knowing that some of the things we put in place this year have gave us the opportunity to continue that path, so that next year we could even surpass where we are now.
And I'd like to bring Denise Murray here on Philadelphia.
Hi, Councilman. Thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Denise. Always a pleasure.
Well, thank you. You were talking about diversion as part of the program you want to put together in terms of the opioid task force. Diversion means different things to different people. What does it mean in this context?
Well, we have two forms of diversion right now that are being piloted. One is the police assistant diversion, which is up in Kensington, where the police officers can pick somebody up, say for illicit drug use, right, or using drugs in the highway, retail theft, prostitution. Bring them over to, we have a facility, FL Allegheny, and then warm handoff them to social services. So there's no charges, there's nothing filed, it's just a warm handoff. The social services then engage that individual, give them the opportunity, what opportunities are available to them. If it's MAT, medical assistance treatment, right? Is it rehab? Is it as far as people with retail theft? Is it, can you go to a class? Is there community service, right? These are the options there. At the end of PAD, there's supposed to be, if they don't take any of those options, then there's a processing point. We're not really doing that in that program right now. If they don't want any of those services, they end up just going back out to where they were before, which is a little bit of a challenge, and we might have to tweak that. The AMP court, alternative misdemeanor program, is a little different. That is where an arrest is made. The district attorney gets the record of the arrest, then diverts that person to the AMP court. He then diverts it to AMP court, the DA, the court administrators there. All the services are there also at AMP court. So any service provider that we need, DHS, Health and Human Services, rehab, MAT, everything that you could think of would be there. Even some opportunities for what we used to do with the dawn court for people in sex trafficking, to be able to give them opportunities to get out of that. Now that there is, you have an opportunity to take some of those programs. Those programs would then be monitored by the court. Now, if you complete the programs, there are no charges. If you don't complete the programs, then you will be processed and charged with a crime. So there's two different types of what we're doing now. And I guess as we pilot these, see which ones have the best outcomes. The AMP court is only 2 days a week right now. It just started in the end of August, early September. So it's supposed to be 5 days a week by the end of the year, starting in a new year. And so I think we'll start to get some data from that to see how they're progressing as far as diverting people who are committing these offenses to hopefully not commit them again, and hopefully get them the opportunity and resources they need so they could get the help and not be part of, the criminal justice system.
So when we talk about diversion, you have some folks who think that having a safe injection site would be a part of diversion. Is that something that's being talked about as part of the task force, or is that a non-starter?
Well, I think everything's on the table. Everything has to be spoken about. Safe injection site is more of a harm reduction model. I'm not sure it's a diversionary model, because what it actually does is allows people to continue using safely, but not diverting them to much help. I went and visited safe injection sites up in Toronto and was actually very much in favor of them until I went there. But we saw a lot of asked a lot of questions, talked to a lot of the neighbors and communities around these safe injection sites. But I think they should be part of the conversation. I don't want to throw my opinion into that conversation, because I know I talk to people who live in the communities, and if these facilities are up and running, but the policies are not in place to protect the surrounding communities where these facilities are in, I, as a representative and elected official, need to represent both the people in addiction, and I also represent the people who live in those neighborhoods. So I have a different feeling on how this is going to be addressed and how it affects the people who live there also. Some people, and I talk to a lot of advocates, say, well, it doesn't matter where the people live. Our goal is just to help the people in addiction. And if those people are negatively impacted, oh, well, that's life. I can't think that way, right? I need to make sure that I evenly listening to the people who live in those communities that are impacted, and trying to help the people in addiction. So the task force and the oversight board will look at these things and see, what the best outcome. And I'm not going to say I agree with everything that they do, right? I'm not there in charge of them and say, you have to do this. That's the whole part of having this committee and this oversight. So it's not just one or two people deciding how the resources are spent.
How do you know how much you're going to have to work with? What level of resources?
Well, we know this year supposedly $23 million. Now, so from talking to the administration, they received some of that money and not all of it. And some folks said, yeah, we have received all of it. So we don't know. Part of this committee's challenge will be to make sure we stay on top of that and where that money is. Secondly, is every year, I think, is a different amount, right? 18 years, $170 million, how that goes. I mean, this money is not enough money to solve our city's problems. It's just enough to get us with, I think, the resources necessary to point us in the right direction. And then the city's going to have to complement those dollars by spending other money, whether it's health and human services and our nonprofit partners to make sure we're addressing the needs on the street. But I think that having the people's eyes on that, concentrating just on the opioid settlement dollars, when we're trying to do it, we're busy doing 20 different things at a time and not really concentrating. Our whole focus is not just on one thing. This oversight committee's focus will be just on that one thing, coming up with recommendations, and then measuring the outcomes of the money being spent. To me, that's the key also of the oversight committee.
Okay, I have one more question, and it's about council itself. Basically, over the last few months, council has done like a kind of a remix where a bunch of your colleagues have decided that they're going to run for mayor. So they've left the body and they've been replaced by new people. You all are still one short because they still haven't had a special election to fill Helen Gim's seat yet, but the seats of like Alan Dom and Derek Green,
Parker, Maria,
all of those folks that have been filled in. Has council gotten a different vibe from this new group of people? Is it still pretty much the same working kind of environment? And how have you adjusted to that?
Yeah, I mean, council is very cohesive body. Not everybody on council thinks the same way, which is great. You need diverse minds on council. You need people to think differently because they challenge each other. They tell you why, they educate each other. They show you concerns from their constituencies. You have district council members that are really in tune with their district, right? It's not citywide. It's just with the challenges in our district. There's 10 of them, right? Then we have 7 at large that deal with city issues, right? And we listen to those folks. We have people who are interested in business development, increasing our business income. We have people interested in just social service issues, right? Everybody had their own little piece, but you put that all together, you get a very effective body that really reaches a lot of different things and really works well together. Again, not saying that everybody agrees, but we all respect each other. We all talk to each other. We all are friendly with each other, and we vote against each other's issues. We vote for each other's issues, but we had a really good rapport. Now, when you bring new people into that mix, and listen, we had some great colleagues leave, right? Sherelle Parker, Helen Gim, Maria Sanchez, Alan Dom, Derek Green, and I'm hearing possibly David O. So, I mean, we might end up with 2 open seats. It couldn't be more diverse people who have left, right, with different ideologies. But bringing new people in, we have to learn what their positions are, right? And then we also have to help them, though. Bringing new people in and guide them on, how does council work? What is the best way to get things done? How do you build the majority? How do you get to 9 votes? The people who have came in, and I got to say, they have been great. And I mean, Sharon's been around forever. Sharon Vaughn, right? Jim Harity, people know him throughout, and he was very associated with Senator Street. And then you have Anthony Phillips, who was up in the Northwest with Sherelle Parker, and you have Ketzi, who worked in the 7th District for Maria Sanchez, Lozada. And so she has a little familiarity with the council and how the council works. So, you know, everybody does bring their own little personality, and you got to find your own niche. So it's going to take a little bit of time, right? And so, you know, the only problem with this time compared to when you first come in, like when I came in, we had 6 new members when I came in. And so, but we all came at the same time, and you had 4 years to work on it. Unfortunately, the people who are just coming in now run again in May, right? So they have to run and win. And so the challenge is now you're focusing on a campaign, right, while you're on council. And so I think you're going to see probably maybe a little bit less things being done. This is my idea in the session after January, from January to June. But to me, this is an important session. We got to get everybody up to speed on the budget. This budget is going to be critical. And I think if we don't concentrate on any additional legislation, one thing we got to get right is our budget. And I think we're going to try to work with our council leadership and Council President Clark to make sure we get people on board and aligned with what our budget priorities are as a council, not an individual. Every individual will have different priorities as far as our budget is concerned, but as a council, what are our global priorities, and make sure we meet them so that when people do run and whoever wins in May and comes in January has a really solid budget to work with so they could push for their agenda.
Okay, well, thank you, Councilman. We really appreciate it. And I'll turn you back over to Larry McGlynn, our co-host here on Hall Monitor, and you're listening to Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5.
Thank you, Denise. Councilmember, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. I have to say, I really enjoyed conversation with the both of you, and thank you for doing this, and you know, making sure people understand and hearing what's going on there, and always also let them know they can always reach out with concerns and whatever it is. Reach out to your council members. They work for you. We're here for your concerns, and that just having the voice and making sure you're sharing that message is so important, so people know that. And I like to wish everybody a happy holiday season, happy, healthy, and prosperous.
You too, Councilman. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day.
We'd like to thank Councilmember Squilla for being with us here on the show. We always enjoy our time with him. So, Lance, why don't you tell us a little bit about SEPTA?
SEPTA, for the first time in 20 some odd years, is doing a redesign of their bus network. And they've brought in an out-of-town consultant to lead the study and to make the recommendations. And what that out-of-town consultant is recommending is really surprising. And I want to just get in front of this and say, one, I ride SEPTA. And two, the neighborhood I ride SEPTA in, I ride the 45, I ride the 27, the 32, and the 4. All of those are routes that the consultant is recommending be either eliminated or the wait times be increased from every 10 minutes to every half an hour or even every hour. So I have an investment in this, and I don't want anyone to not hear that. The consultant is saying that during COVID, the people who use the system were using it at unusual times, not the normal Monday through Friday times. And so she decided that we have to redesign the system to accommodate the riders who were using it during the COVID shutdown. So that's 20% of the riders. And because they're saying they're not going to add any resources, what they're going to do is reconfigure it. And they're going to take the rides from the 80% who are coming back to SEPTA, who are the school students, who are people who are back to work, take their rides, cut back on their rides, eliminate their routes. They're going to recommend going from 125 routes to 99 routes, but that's not the full story, as you'll hear. Many of the routes that they say are still in place have been dramatically decreased in how often they'll run or where they go. And the way they're doing that is saying, well, the 20% during COVID, the COVID shutdown, ride on Saturdays and Sundays. So let's take the rides from the 80% who ride during the weekday, make them wait longer so we have more rides on the weekend. And that's on top of the SEPTA having a tremendous amount of surplus. Right now, SEPTA has what they call a fare stabilization fund from the federal dollars that flowed into COVID. And that money, instead of SEPTA using that money to make SEPTA safer, to make it cleaner, to make it more accessible, SEPTA is now saying, well, we're going to hold that money back because we don't think we can get the people to come back to SEPTA. Because SEPTA services are being cut, it's unlikely as many riders will ride it, and so therefore there'll be less revenue, and therefore they're going to hold that money back to plug the budget holes. It's one of the more cynical things I think I've ever seen, where you have an institution, an authority saying, we're planning to fail. We don't think we can get riders to come back on the system. So the way we're going to deal with it, instead of figuring out what riders need, how to get people back on the SEPTA, what we're going to do is cut the service now and save money so that later on, when we have a budget shortfall, we'll have the money to plug the hole. If everything goes as SEPTA plans, we'll be far worse off than we are now. What I have is a video of two different meetings, one in the Northwest, where riders showed up to speak out. You'll hear their concerns, you'll hear what they're saying. And then one from a meeting at 1234 Market Street that was from North Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, and South Philadelphia riders, where SEPTA didn't bother to make a presentation. And I think the comparison between the two groups is very. So if we can start the video now, and then with the time, I'll follow up with just a few short facts so people can understand just how bad this proposal is.
And we're glad everybody came out tonight because it's a matter of utmost importance to people, especially the fact that there has to be bus service from Roxborough, Manayunk, and or in the center city. And the other fact is that in Philadelphia, SEPTA is our school buses. And kids have to get to and from school. And I see by the turnout, this is a important decision for everybody. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dan and Bethany, and hopefully we get everybody in. And let me see if I can find the councilman and bring him in. All right. And if they don't give us what we want, then we'll deal with it.
Let me answer
How
some
much
of
are
the
you being
questions.
paid?
I wrote SEPTA tonight. I do write SEPTA sometimes. It's not about me, right? So I want to answer some of the questions, but we also looked at the COVID data and how ridership changed during the COVID period, including up to now. And some of the things that we noticed was that SEPTA's bus service right now is very much oriented around sort of a traditional 9-to-5 type of commute. And a lot of the people that stayed on the bus during COVID were people, essential workers, people that didn't work 9-to-5, that worked on Saturdays and Sundays and into the evenings. And so because we don't have any more resources, some of the things that we're trying to do is spread the service around. So there is more service on Saturdays, there is more service on Sundays. People who need to get to the jobs in retails and hospitals, in supermarkets, and all the places that a lot of those people really depend on the service, and we're trying to make sure that it is accessible to more people at more times. And so one of the strategies behind this network is to have fewer routes, but operate those routes more frequently. Well, so we're still designing the network. It's not complete. It's a work in progress.
Seriously? And then we get told through the grapevine, not major news network. I mean, I hear everything on the major news. I hear every shooting, every carjacking, every fire, every everything. I didn't hear anything about this on the news. Okay, so that's crazy to me that this wouldn't be front and center first 5 minutes. Okay? But we go down to the zoning board, we fight this, we spend tons of money civic associations don't have from donations from our citizens to be told driving is a thing of the past, development is taking over, you're going to take priority to go to school, they're not getting home till 9 o'clock at night, and you want to make them transfer and reduce the busing that's up here for them to get to school directly? This is insane to me. So I think you need to get together with the city. Y'all need to figure out, are we taking public transportation, in which case the Northwest section needs more, not less service? Or are we stopping development? Are we decreasing the bus service? And are we telling the middle-aged people, take your car to Center City and pay $30 a day to park? Exactly. Because you can't have it both ways. And I'll tell you right now, my kid is not getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go to school and coming home at 10 o'clock in the night. So you guys got to figure out something, and it's got to be more than just your bottom line. It's got to be the safety of the elderly that are having trouble getting to their doctor's appointments. It's got to be the safety of the children. Make this safer to drive on. or tell us we need to rely on public transportation and then not take it away.
Two things. I have two observations and one suggestion. Spinning wheels here tonight, which is a shame. We shouldn't have to do that. This plan is DOA. Forget it. DOA, okay? So why don't we do this with the blessing of Councilman Jones and Mr. Mayor, for a working committee, live, not online, older folks, young folks, students, whatever else, form a working committee to work with you folks who are obviously outsiders, don't know the neighborhood, and don't know our patterns, and what we do here. You don't know. So I suggest that Councilman Jones can lead the way here, okay? Form a working committee, maybe 10, 20, 30 folks, who knows? Of all stripes, to get with you, to show you what you're doing wrong, and bring you into the culture of the neighborhood.
According to you, this is not about money. So since it's not about money, I suggest you trash the whole thing and leave it the way it is.
Have you spoken to either the school district or any of the colleges and universities? What have they said? No. Yes. Really? Because none of the schools knew. I can tell you right now, none of the schools know.
I actually work at Roman Catholic. And
oh, you got a gentleman from Roman Catholic High School.
I've been working at Roman the last 20 years, and actually, I haven't heard a word at all about this. I heard on Facebook, one was hate. I have not heard one word. And actually, I'm in charge of transportation here.
At my Girl Scout troop meeting, I asked two girls who are in high school how they get to school, and they're on SEPTA. And I said, are you coming to the Revolution meeting? They never heard of any of this stuff. It has to be discussed with those people who are going to school. It's going to affect them. Okay,
to address the concerns, there has to be better communication to the Girl Scouts, to people all over Philadelphia that are affected by these lines. I mean, the communication is bad, and it really is your responsibility, or where you come from. You have to communicate with us and give us not just, oh, it's on the website, go there, let's figure it out. I mean, that's putting the burden and the responsibility on us, and that's not fair.
North Philly, and some in South Philly. I think general awareness is not where it needs to be, but.
I've been living out here all my life. I remember when the bus was Z-Bus, A local and A express. So this is no new thing out here. I think that they really need to regroup. It's bad enough that the children are out on the corner, like one of the young ladies said. It's dark in the winter time and in the fall and stuff like that. They're going in the dark and it's early. They're going in dark, coming home it's dark, and it's ridiculous. They don't need no change at all with neither buses.
But other countries have done this with all this on demand, and there's articles that says it doesn't work because at the end of the day, people prefer the fixed routes, and the people prefer the routes the way they were. And instead of getting better, they get worse.
Yeah.
So then we need to stop this now and just make sure that everybody tells SEPTA to actually rethink this system and make sure that there are other ways to bring riders into the buses instead of changing something that is working.
Yeah, so I just wanted, there are a bunch of people that weren't able to make it in, so I'm going to do a couple more questions, but then we're going to try to figure out a way to rejigger the room. We're just going to, yeah.
No, we understand that. We're trying to figure out.
We're trying to figure out a way to get 2 virtual meetings earlier in the fall. We heard very clearly that the initial draft proposal was unacceptable. We reworked it. Quite a bit. We spent the last hour or so talking to some of you other folks who didn't like the reworked version either. But I'm going to go through the reworked proposal. I'll go slowly. I'll try to be clear. Feel free to raise your hand. It's a smaller crowd, so we can make it a little easier. But I do want to just note very quickly that This is the first time SEPTA's done a project like this before. We have a bus network that has largely been the same for decades, and we've never really even looked at our system comprehensively before. So we're really trying to get a network-wide perspective and make improvements that have improved, that are sort of system-wide improvements. So I'm going to go through the updated proposal. If you sat in on the last session, I apologize that you have to hear it again. But what we heard very clearly from the two virtual sessions was,
I'm glad that you're thinking about it, but this, as she says, is bringing us backwards with this cost neutral thing, where there's tons of money for the King of Prussia expansion, there's tons of money for regional rail. What about the bus riders? What about the people in the city who do want this? This is a public good, accessibility. I know you've got this idea that you're just going to redesign everything from the ground up, maybe somehow like figure it out better. Well, there are histories to why there are routes and there are histories.
You've heard from 24 people with great points. The point is, you got to go back to the drawing board. Don't just go back to try to change it, make it better. What we want is reliability, frequency, safety, cost. Go back to the drawing board, make it better, don't change it.
Yeah, thanks to the 7th Street for coming out today. There's obviously a lot of passion for what the system provides here. But in the context of design effort, I think there's been some good comments about the process. What opportunities are there for meaningful collaboration before the next iteration of this design on a more productive basis with the work?
I think there was a gentleman who left, but he recommended sort of a smaller working group, which I think is a great idea. I'm happy to stick with it. We're not done yet, but we can talk. If people would like to participate, we can pass along your contact information. We can start a dialogue and we can figure something out.
Sure, so if some of the civics will reach out to you ahead of time, maybe we can start to develop that working group. I appreciate it. Another question is,
I think also to having a process where people can comment specifically on the changes, because I think from what we saw.
So that was what the meeting looked like in the Northwest. We're a little short of time. The meeting for North Philadelphia, West Philadelphia, and South Philadelphia looked very different. There was no presentation. There were posters around the room. People were not welcomed. They were not asked to speak. They were not asked for their recommendations. And as a result of the meeting in the Northeast and what people have been saying, City Council has introduced a resolution to call for hearings. What is somewhat surprising is who is siding with the riders and who is quiet. I would have expected that the progressives on City Council would jump on this. SEPTA is an institution that serves the working poor, that serves the school students, that serves the disabled. So what I would have expected the progressive members to be in the forefront of demanding hearings and protecting the system. Because as one of the speakers we heard say, SEPTA is proposing to expand the regional rail line for billions of dollars to King of Prussia. At the same time, they're proposing to cut routes from Philadelphia and to make people wait longer. When the hearing date is set, we'll announce it. We'll encourage people to show up and speak out. If you have concerns, of course, you can reach us at info@hallmonitor. We'd be happy to talk with you, email you. And if you have specific information about your line and you would like to talk about it, we'd be happy to have you on the air.
Absolutely. Well, I think you're muted there, Denise.
Oh, okay. First of all, Lance, thanks for sharing that with us. And I was kind of surprised that the 4 is one of the routes they're looking to cut, because that basically goes up and down Broad Street.
It's a real surprise. What they're saying is you don't have to use the Broad Street lines.
Well, they need to. Okay, he's talking, but
It has older people in it, and they can't get down the steps. And the few places where there are elevators, the elevators are often, unfortunately, used as bathrooms. I know that's not SEPTA's fault, but we can't ignore that fact. And so they're very unpleasant, and asking people to go down steps and the Broad Street line doesn't stop every block or even every other block, it's not the equivalent. But yet SEPTA has said in their meetings, if you don't like the additional weight for the Broad Street bus, just take the Broad Street subway. It's not an answer, and I'm hoping City Council, and again, I have a vested interest in this. I ride those buses. So I'm hoping City Council will ask them to do the same thing for every neighborhood. There's something that really is upsetting about SEPTA saying to the riders in the Northwest, yes, we understand you don't like this. We're going to go ahead and form working groups so we can figure out what the riders here want, but yet not make the same offer to riders in West Philadelphia, North Philadelphia, or South Philadelphia. I don't understand two different types of response from SEPTA.
Oh, I do. And also what we need to remember about the SEPTA board, at least unless something has changed, it is mostly made up of suburban folks, which is why the King of Prussia expansion is being talked about, which is why all of these different things that are more suburban based are being talked about. And it's also odd to me that if SEPTA is really so concerned about losing riders, why are you basically making it so you're not only going to lose the riders that you did have, but the 20% that you are catering to, which to me is just odd because, you know, people aren't as concerned about COVID to stay home like that anymore. It's just, you're when you said that the people who were doing this were from out of town, that kind of told me everything I needed to know. And
big red flag.
That tells you everything you need to know because they don't know how Philadelphia conducts itself. And you can't tell me that there was no firm in the entire Delaware Valley that you couldn't have brought in to have this discussion.
I think you summed it up. Thank you. We'll continue to follow this. We'll continue to bring people new information. SEPTA is promising to have a final proposal in February or March of this year. We'll wait to see the city council hearings and give people an opportunity to be heard.
All right. Thank you so much for keeping an eye on that, Lance.
Yes.
Denise, we've got all kinds of stuff going on with city council, the city council election, which is not until May.
Right. But here's the thing. What we just saw in terms of the SEPTA hearings and the fact that Curtis Jones was basically standing there with a microphone in his hand and not really saying a whole lot goes back to something that we say all the time here on Hall Monitor when it's time to elect city council members. There is only so much you can do as an at-large council member. So I'm kind of confused as to why everybody and their mother has decided that they're going to run for city council at large. Rue Landau announced today that the former head of the Philadelphia Human Relations Commission, she's running for city council at large. Nina Ahmad, who was a candidate for Auditor General, one of the last election cycles, she's running for council at large. D. Michael Blackie, who I guess the best way to describe him is a local political gadfly, is running for council at large. And that's not everybody. You have Melissa Robbins from the Northeast Coalition Against Hate is running. She's also a member of the NAACP Executive Board. You have a whole lot of other people who are running for city council at large. The city council at large list is probably going to resemble a phone book. And yet, despite the fact that these folks are taking more money than it requires to run a council, like a district council race, to run citywide for city council at large, they're taking this time and they're taking this money to run for these offices, and yet they will have very little, if any, power to make any kind of decisions about what's going on in the city. because anything that a city council at large person gets passed through council can be nullified by the simple action of a member of the district council person saying, we're going to carve out an exemption for my district. So to me, it's hustling backward. It's basically, I want a position on city council, but I don't want to fight for one of the positions that's really going to make some noise. And I don't understand what that's about.
And also, David O last week at City Council, he's a council member at large. He brought up the fact that at-large council members don't have that pot of money that district council members do for projects within the district.
Right.
And he said whenever he wants to do anything, he has to raise the money on his own. So in that regard, also, council at large has different challenges than what a district council member would have. I guess the only reason I think you might consider doing it is because even though it's a bigger race, right? You're running all across the city. It's 5 seats for the majority. So maybe what you're thinking is, I'm going to run for this thing. And if it's a big field and I draw a good number, I have a good chance. It's like with the judge races, right? Nobody knows who the judges are when they run for judge. You're kind of voting for whoever's the number 1 on the ballot, number 2 on the ballot, number 3 on the ballot. It's kind of usually how it works, unless there's somebody who really did raise a lot of money. But usually that doesn't happen too much. I think that's why you saw maybe 1 or 2 people who were considering running for a district council seat decide, okay, I'm going to maybe go at large, because at least the numbers are maybe a little more in their favor. It's not a 2-way race. It's a multiple. It could be 20
billion way race.
Yeah.
And you are basically at the mercy of a horn and hard art coffee can from which they select the numbers. What number comes out of the horn and hard art can? And I don't even know if horn and hard art even exists anymore. But the number that comes out of that can determines your political future. And it's nuts.
And there are other ways to do that. And just as a brief aside, because it's something that bothers me a lot, you could just stagger the numbers for every polling place. So you could be 1 in one polling place, 2 in another, 3. I don't think that's hard to do. But it's not. I don't think that's a change that we're going to see anytime soon.
No.
It'll be interesting to see what's left of the Democratic City Committee and how important their endorsements are. So we have 4 incumbents. We have, as Denise says, multiple people running against those 4 incumbents. Is there enough left of the Democratic Party to turn away the challenges? Or is the Democratic City Committee really on its last gasp? And if so, it really raises the issue of who's going to turn out the vote for the next presidential election. So I think there's a lot to think about and a lot to consider, but it's very difficult to decide what's going to happen at this point.
Right. And we have to make sure that all the candidates who are declared right now get on the ballot, because there's a petition process, and that has been a major tripping point for some candidates historically, particularly the ones who don't do their own petition.
And it's even been a problem for incumbents. There are incumbents who have gotten knocked off the ballot with bad petitions.
So, maybe when we get close to that time of year, we can talk about that. I used to run petitions for the Delaware County Democratic Party 20 years ago. So maybe that's something I could tell you a little bit about. But we're just about out of time. So next week on the show, we'll be joined by Council Member Anthony Phillips, and we'll also have the continuation of our interview with David O. So thank you all for being with us, and we'll see you next week.